My brother Drew and I had spent nearly 7 weeks driving 11,000 miles across Europe and Asia, and we had plenty of battle wounds to show from our adventure. So far, we'd been to 8 mechanics, been towed about half a dozen times, and overheated more times than we could count, busted a hole in our radiator, blown our head gasket, broken our rear axle, and had a major tire blowout. And we still had several days to go before we reached the end of our journey. But when you take a trip like this, it's all par for the course. Before we set out from southern England, I remember speaking with Mongol Rally organizer Jules Ingram. He'd warned me of the sorts of challenges that were in store for us, but he didn't want to hear any excuses. In true British fashion, his advice was simply to keep calm and carry on.
I always think that people who don't reach the finish line, it's probably down to them more than it is to their car. A lot of things can be fixed, and things that can't be fixed can be swapped. And, we've had countless people who have properly broken down and not been able to fix their car and, hitchhike the rest of the way. There's a phrase in Mongolia to Mongolize something. So, for example, when we did the rally, our suspension exploded. We limped to a garage, and a Fiat 126 is like one of the smallest cars that have ever been built. And he managed to swap our front suspension for part of the rear suspension off a Lada. And it kind of rose the front of our car about a foot off the ground. But it worked. And almost anything can be fixed with a bit of determination. One day we had a tyre pop on our car and we didn't have a spare. I went to a mechanic and he said, well, I don't have anything that will fix this necessarily. But what I do have is a 13-inch motorcycle inner tube. And we were like, this is an 11-inch car tyre. That's probably not going to work. He's like, yeah, it'll be fine. And sure enough, he stuck the tube in, and within half an hour, we're on our way for, I think that cost us about £2. With determination, there is almost always a way, definitely.
I'm Scott Gurian. I'm a longtime public radio and print reporter, and I've created this podcast called Far From Home to document the unexpected adventures and chance encounters I have with interesting people around the world. On this first season, I've been telling the story of a massive road trip my brother and I took with our friends, raising money for charity. We drove nearly 11,000 miles.
11,000?
That's right, a quarter of the way around the Earth, from London to Mongolia, through 18 countries, 8 time zones, 5 mountain ranges, and a few deserts, in a ridiculously tiny car.
It's like the Beverly Hillbillies.
It's not for the faint of heart.
It's the adventure, isn't it? It's just the thing of pushing yourself to the absolute limit, because I think it's going to take us out of our comfort zone, but in a really good way.
If you're just joining me, I suggest you first go back and listen to all the previous episodes in order to get up to speed and for all of this to make a bit more sense. From language barriers to car trouble, getting horribly lost to paying bribes to shady traffic cops, it's been quite an amazing experience. So listen in as I bring all of you along with me for the ride. We'd barely driven across the western part of Mongolia, but it would be an understatement to say that this country had already kicked our ass. In the little taste we'd gotten so far, there was no pavement, no signs, no cell service, hardly any people, and long distances between places. So if we got stranded somewhere, which was inevitable sooner or later, it was difficult to get help. If you listened to the past few episodes, you heard how we'd gotten stuck in the middle of nowhere and had to contact the big guns at the American Embassy to send a team of guys to perform an overnight rescue. Now that we'd made it back to civilization in the city of Kavd and had gotten our car repaired yet again, it was time to reassess our plan going forward. You see, it was a Friday in early September by this point, and it seemed crazy to think about, but just 1 week from today, Drew and our friends Jane and Rosie had to be at the finish line in Ulan-Ude, Russia, to catch their flights home. The thing is, between now and then, we still had more than 1,200 miles to go. To put that in perspective, that's about halfway across America, like if you drove from New York to Kansas City. So you might be thinking, no big deal, I could do that in 3 days. But remember, this is Mongolia we're talking about. Without an interstate highway system or even paved roads in most places, we'd be averaging just 10 or 15 miles per hour. We looked at our maps and did the math, and it still seemed doable, but it would require some pretty long days of driving. As Jane noted, there wasn't much wiggle room for error.
If we've got a 10-hour journey tomorrow and that is going on the right route, we can't afford a wrong turn.
No,
we just can't afford it because we won't make it.
We have to make it.
Yeah.
So we came up with a plan. Jane and Rosie contacted a local tour company, and they put us in touch with a guy named Watt, who was a middle school geography teacher. We negotiated a price and arranged for him and his teenage son to lead us in their 4x4 for the next several days, watch after us, and make sure we stayed on track. Given the challenges we'd faced in Mongolia so far, my brother and I agreed that it seemed like the best option.
I'd love the pride of doing it on our own, of course, but if day one or day two is any indication of what lies ahead, which I'm pretty certain it is, we're in a heap of trouble. Yeah.
Once we had our escort lined up, we all felt like we could breathe a sigh of relief, because it meant we'd be able to enjoy the final few days of our journey without stressing out too much over the logistics. That night, as we sat in our hotel's restaurant waiting for dinner to arrive, we thought back on all that had transpired over the previous 24 hours. Sure, it was pretty harrowing when we were in the middle of it all, but now that it was just a memory, it felt different.
On a very positive front, I know it was a horrendous journey last night, but I did actually enjoy it.
What do you mean?
No, I did. I loved it.
What part of it? What was your favorite?
It was such an extraordinary day. There was so much happened. So many things happened. And it all started off so well.
You remember how just a few days earlier Jane had said she hated Mongolia?
It's cold, it's wet, it's miserable. I've not seen anything here that I like yet.
Now she'd had a change of heart. To be fair, she still hated Olgi, the last city we'd stayed in, because it seemed a bit sketchy and made her uncomfortable. But to hear Jane tell it, ever since then, the weather had improved, the people had gotten friendlier, and the landscape more eye-catching.
I was saying to Rosie, there was a programme on English TV, and she went across Mongolia on the Trans-Siberian Railway, and she was saying how stunning it was and how beautiful, but it doesn't translate. You just see these plains of nothingness and you go, well, that's just nothing. It's only when you're there and you're in it, you kind of appreciate how beautiful it is, because it is stunning.
Meanwhile, Rosie had developed her own newfound appreciation for some of the unpaved roads on which we've been driving.
Rosie hated sand. Since we've been going over those washboard roads, now she loves sand.
I love sand.
She loves sand.
I love it.
Because sand is so much nicer than...
Sand is my friend.
It's the opposite of washboard.
That washboard is just...
I know.
Well, it's not actually really a good piece of road by anybody's stretch of
it's a
imagination.
shocking piece of road.
It's a terrible piece of road. If that was a piece of road in the UK or Australia, we'd be whinging and moaning about it. But because it's all relative to what it is we're driving
Because
on,
it's not
we
washboard.
Exactly. We become so thrilled. Oh, goody, sand!
And there was another thing that pleasantly surprised us. If you've listened to this series since the beginning, you might remember the conversation Drew and I had way back in episode 3, where I spoke about some of the horror stories I'd heard about Mongolian cuisine, including from writer Tim Wu, who called it the most disgusting food ever. That characterization might be totally accurate in many cases, but here in this restaurant, when our dinner arrived at the table, we were impressed.
Sometimes you have
chicken.
chicken nuggets. Chicken nuggets.
And rice, and you've got rice.
This was by no means a fancy place, but everything looked delicious. I should remind you that Drew and I were the vegetarians in the group, and we'd heard that Mongolia was a really bad place for people like us, so our expectations were particularly low. But somehow, the chef here knew just what to make.
Wow. Amazing.
Yes.
It was a plate with sizzling vegetables, and it was easily the tastiest thing we'd had in quite a while.
Who knew we'd get really good food in Mongolia? It's the last place I expected.
Oh, yeah.
Feeling nourished for a change, we headed off to bed. Then we set out with our guide early the following morning to make the 275-mile journey to Altai, the next town on our route. At first, the road was pretty smooth and well-paved, which none of us were expecting, but before long, it became really sandy again, almost like we were driving on a beach, and our cars didn't seem to like it. We managed to get most of the way to our destination, actually making good time, until mechanical issues caught up with us once again. But This time it was Rosie and Jane's car that had issues, overheating for no apparent reason. That was surprising, because this was the first time they'd broken down the entire trip, so now it was our turn to tow them. As we arrived on the outskirts of town, we saw a sign on a garage up ahead from some guys who'd cleverly decided to capitalize on the steady flow of crappy cars from foreign tourists passing through, and it was immediately clear that that's where we had to go.
What better place to take our broken Mongol Rally car than Mongol Rally Auto Service? Listen to that horn. Wait, let me hear the horn again. That's pretty sad. Sounds like a dying yak or something.
But our horn was the least of our worries, and that's not why we'd come. We detached the tow rope, got out of our cars, and looked around. One wall of the garage was covered with stickers from other rally teams going back over a decade, and inside we found an ambulance that some Italian ralliers had apparently abandoned 4 years earlier when they weren't able to finish their trip. The mechanic quickly diagnosed that Rosie and Jane's car had lost a fan belt somewhere along the way.
Oh, the belt is gone.
Oh, the belt's gone?
No belt. Yeah. No belt.
But once he found a new one, it was an easy fix. The bigger challenge came when we asked him to take a look at our car, which had started making a clicking sound when we turned our steering wheel, and he told us that we'd somehow broken our drive shaft. You know, it's crazy. When I think back on this trip, I learned way more about car parts than I ever imagined I would. But I shouldn't complain, because most of the other rally teams we ran into had stories of their own, and some were way worse than us. Like the team that busted a hole in their oil sump after trying to drive on particularly rough terrain against the advice of the locals.
We were 4 days ago, tried to go north. We were literally in this town, and we said, can we go north? And all the guys and mechanics were like, no, you can't go north from that car. So we did. They were right. It turns out the Mongolians knew their roads, and you actually can't.
Or Lizzie from Team Driving Miss Daisy, who showed me how the back of her car had a giant dent.
So we've had an accident in Azerbaijan. That was a 4-car pile-up. As you probably have heard, the Azerbaijanis are the worst drivers in the world. And a car was indicating left into a village, and a Mercedes overtook, crashed into the car. I went into that car, and another car went into me. But it was all fixable. No one was hurt.
And any other big issues with your car?
Yeah, lots of big issues. Another thing that we didn't realise was that it's a good idea to tighten your nuts on the wheels, because one of our wheels flew off.
Oh my gosh, how fast were you going?
Probably about 80 kilometres an hour.
That's about 50 miles per hour.
You were going 80 kilometers an hour on the Pamir Highway.
Yeah.
And the wheel flew off.
Yep. Oh. Well, first of all, the exhaust flew off, and then 2 minutes later, the wheel flew off. And it took 2 men 14 hours to fix.
I felt better about our Nissan Micra after James and Alex from a Scottish team called the Slippery Gypsies showed me the battle wounds on their Peugeot.
The rear bumper's gone. The bumper got ripped off when we bottomed out looking for a camping site in Kazakhstan, I think. And both our wheel bearings are broken, so our tyres are about 45 degrees. So the rest of the car, angle. Yeah, at a jaunty angle. The back window smashed in because Dave threw a rock at it. Mm-hmm. What else is wrong? The power steering pump's been broken since the start. So you have to pour fluid into it or else it just won't idle sometimes. So we had to do that at the border on the way here.
Did you think it would make it this far?
No. Originally we thought yes. Originally we thought, yeah, it'll be fine, no worries. And then we broke down in like Belgium, and then we realised, oh god, this is going to be hard. We had a lot of big problems early on. Our clutch went, our alternator went, we had air in our fuel line, which nearly killed us in Iran. A lot of things, yeah.
But at least they still had a car, unlike Matthias from Holland, whose 1981 Opel Kadett started having trouble when he'd barely even crossed into Asia.
Everything went really well until Turkey, and we spent a few days there with the mechanics. They said go to Georgia, because they have more Opel there, so they might be able to help you. I think in Georgia we visited maybe 30 or 40 mechanics in 2 weeks' time. Nobody knew how to fix it. It was just stuttering all the time. We've taken apart half of the engine, the carburetor, the pumps, everything. We just took it apart piece by piece, cleaned it, put it back together. We still don't know what's the problem is. We just went to the customs in Tbilisi with the car and we said it's total loss, nobody can fix it, we don't know what to do.
You just abandon it?
Yeah. 2 weeks' time, a lot of stress and a lot of money, and we were done with it.
His teammate threw in the towel and flew back home, but Matthias wasn't ready to give up. He took a train to Armenia, wandered around for a bit, then flew to the capital of Tajikistan, where he found other rally teams passing through town, and from then on he started hitching rides. After hearing stories like these, I realized that maybe our situation wasn't so bad after all. There at the garage in Altai, our mechanic spent a few hours calling around town, but eventually he was able to find a replacement part for us, and by the following afternoon, we were back on our way, heading another 250 miles to the town of Bayan Hungar at the edge of the Gobi Desert. People had warned us that that day's drive would take us on some of the roughest roads we'd encounter on our entire drive across Mongolia, and sure enough, it didn't disappoint. As had happened before, our repairs had put us several hours behind schedule, so now we'd be driving late into the evening to try to make up time. Actually, there was this moment a few hours before sunset when we stopped to rest near a small group of gurs, what Mongolians call their yurts, and we considered simply staying there for the night, but after some deliberation, we decided to push ahead to our original destination. It was still 3 hours away, and we'd be driving after dark, but Watt told us the road would improve, so we soldiered on, and it soon became clear that we'd made the wrong decision. Despite his assurances, the road did not seem to get any better, and Watt drove really far ahead of us, so we struggled to keep up and not get lost. As our car creaked increasingly louder with each bump, we worried that we were going way too fast on this rough terrain. We only had 30 or 40 miles left to go when we rounded a hill and thought we heard a dragging sound from the left side of the vehicle. Then something didn't feel quite right, so we pulled over. Drew and I got down on the ground to peer under our car and see what was going on, and wouldn't you know it, our wishbone had cracked again, right next to where it had cracked a couple days earlier.
This is the weld job. The weld job held. It split after the weld.
Oh, yeah. Wow.
I was like, if this is supposedly the last day of really bad roads, and we can get past this day, maybe we'll make it to the finish line without any more issues. We're so close.
There were signs of life off in the distance. It was pitch dark, so we hadn't noticed at first, but now we saw something on the horizon.
Hey, look, someone lives over there. There's a yurt with a house. So we're not totally stranded. That's a plus. That's a start.
There's a yurt. Look.
I think they heard the dog barking, so they turned on the lights to see what's going on.
After about 10 minutes, Watt and his son, who were supposed to be guiding us, finally realized that we were no longer trailing them. So they turned around and came back to find us stopped there on the side of the road. We showed them the issue.
You could see underneath there.
Split. Yeah. Bad.
Their English wasn't great, so it was hard to communicate, but they understood. After examining the situation, they decided to drive over to the Gur to ask for help, leaving the four of us alone to ponder our fate.
Well, Mongolia certainly is trying to kill us. Yeah. Or at least kill our spirit. Oh, dear.
Does anyone want a drink?
Have you got some?
We have vodka and cranberry juice.
Yeah. Make me a drink then, please.
After a little while, Watt returned to give us an update.
In the Gur?
In the Gur?
English teacher.
English teacher?
Really? English. Yes.
What are the chances of that? Oh my gosh. We have the weirdest luck, don't we?
Seriously?
A woman stepped out of his truck and came up to greet us.
Hello.
You're an English teacher?
Yes.
Oh, that's hilarious.
What are the chances?
That's amazing. Hello. My name is Rosie. Hi.
My name is Pasca.
Pasca, good to meet you.
Yes.
Unfortunately, though, it turned out that her English wasn't actually much better than Watt's. She spoke with him for a few minutes, then shared with us her idea.
Minor. 3 miles. Minor.
What is minor?
It took a moment to figure out what she was trying to say, but apparently 3 miles away there were some gold miners who had welding equipment, so she was offering to take us to them to see if they could fix our car. In retrospect, it probably would have made an interesting story, but we thought it would be better to see an actual mechanic.
We need a truck
Yes.
To take the car to a welder in town.
We showed her a picture we'd taken of our car on the back of the flatbed truck a few days earlier, and then she understood. In fact, she said that one of her neighbors owned a tow truck just like that, so we agreed that he would come get us in the morning. She invited us to spend the night in her family's gur, but we wanted to stay with our cars, so we politely declined and offered that Watt and his son could sleep there instead. Then we said goodnight.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
And we're sorry.
We're sorry.
We're so sorry.
No problem.
Really.
It's been very difficult.
Yeah, I know.
The Mongolian roads.
Mongolian roads are very bad.
Yes. Okay. All right. We will see you tomorrow.
Watt nodded and waved goodbye.
God, he's been really good.
Who keeps a flatbed truck at their gur?
Wouldn't you? Wouldn't you?
Probably make a lot of business out here, right?
Oh, yeah.
I bet it says Mongol Rally on it.
Yeah, but it does too.
I keep waiting to find a repair garage inside of a gur. Wouldn't that be awesome?
We woke up around 8 the following morning, and Vaska invited us into one of her family's gurs, where she served us warm milk she'd collected from her herd of goats. If you've never been in a gur before, it's kind of like entering a giant igloo, except it had a wooden frame and linoleum floor, and sides made of canvas and felt. The inside was about 15 feet across, which Watt explained to us was slightly smaller than the homes of the nomadic people in Kazakhstan. There was a tiny coal-burning stove in the center, with a chimney that poked up through the roof. The morning air outside was chilly, but it was nice and toasty in the gur, with the stove providing warmth and sheep's wool insulation padding the walls. We watched as Vaska prepared breakfast for her family. That consisted of sausages, hard bricks of homemade goat cheese, and something that looked like some sort of pancakes or crepes. Although she was living off the grid out there in the middle of a field, it was actually more comfortable than you might expect, with a small solar panel providing electricity, and even a satellite dish outside the front door so they could watch TV. The flatbed showed up a short time later, and if you listened to my last episode, you know the deal by now with tow trucks in Mongolia. Like the last time, it wasn't able to tilt, so once again we had to be creative and find somewhere where we could park the truck that was lower than the road and then build a ramp with some tires and wooden boards so we could drive the car onto it. Then, after we got to town, there was a whole drama of figuring out how to get the car back off.
There's no way this is going to work. I just don't get it.
You're probably getting tired of this by now, so I'll spare you the details. Suffice it to say that after a lot of hand-wringing and jaw-clenching, we eventually got our car welded back together. We'd made it past the hardest part of our route and survived, so we bid farewell to Watt and his son, confident that we'd be able to handle the rest of our journey on our own. As we neared Mongolia's capital, Ulaanbaatar, the paved roads returned, and things became far easier from then on. Sadly, we didn't have much time to explore the city because we had to keep going to make up for lost time, so when I think back on it now, it's all kind of a blur. But one thing I do clearly remember is how we felt the day after that, when we crossed back into Russia and were approaching Ulan-Ude, our final destination. 53 days after we'd begun our trip from southern England, it was nearly complete. I announced on the walkie-talkie as we entered the outskirts of the city.
So I guess this would be Ulan-Ude.
Yay!
We've just come 11,000 miles. You sound a little underwhelmed.
I've just woken up, that's why. Sorry, hang on a minute.
Well, despite whatever she says, I think this is exciting.
Yeah. I think we're all so exhausted at this point, and relieved, above all. I mean, we're still a few kilometers away. The car can still die.
Don't you dare, shut up.
But I'm just really amazed that we have made it despite all of the issues that we've had with the car.
It just feels so good to be back in civilization.
Despite the fact that we're in Siberia, this has a certain feeling of normalcy, I think, just rolling into this city that feels comforting, I think.
I guess I didn't realize how much I missed this.
In 300 meters, turn left.
Oh, we're almost here. 1 minute away.
We're 1 minute away!
I glanced in the rearview mirror. Rosie was clapping with excitement, and Jane, who was now wide awake, had a giant grin on her face.
Here it is!
This is so cool.
We positioned our cars side by side to drive up together to the finish line banner.
Okay, here we go.
Let's go.
It was a mostly empty hotel parking lot.
There's like no one here. This is really lame. Okay, there's like 4 people here.
So anticlimactic.
It was now about 7 in the evening, and there were just a handful of other rally cars with people cleaning things and sorting through their gear. Many of the other teams who'd taken shorter routes or had fewer mechanical problems had already arrived over the previous few weeks and then flown home, so things by this point had started to die down.
Wow.
It's so quiet.
It's pathetic.
I feel like the party's over and everyone's gone home and we're just showing up. Hey, everyone, let's,
It's not supposed to have ended.
It was not the scene we were expecting. We struck up a conversation with a woman named Liz, who'd arrived the day before, and she'd had a similar experience.
We kind of drove in and no one saw us, and then belatedly they went, "Oh, yay, yay!"
When you think about how utterly epic this has been, I mean, we have gone through so much up and downs and, you know, are we going to finish? And now here we are. And where the flipping heck is everybody?
I don't know.
I wanted elephants, I wanted noise, I wanted streamers. It's been bloody epic getting here.
Or if not elephants, at least camels.
Well,
yaks or something.
I would settle for a one-hump, you know.
You see, you just set your height so low. You should be going for the 2-humped camel.
Anything would be more than we have here.
As much as people had warned us that after a trip like this, there's no way that crossing the finish line would ever be quite as exciting as we had hoped, it still felt a bit sad. But I remembered back to that conversation I had several months earlier with rally organizer Jules Ingram, who told me to look at the big picture.
Physically and aesthetically, the finish line is never going to live up to your expectations, but emotionally and psychologically, you know, it's massive. And it's not arrogant to say that it does change people's lives. We're lucky enough to see them at the start and at the finish. They kind of go through a transformation, you know. They start off cocky and arrogant and think they know everything about the world. And by the end, they're open-minded and they're changed, I think.
While I don't think we were ever cocky and arrogant, it's clear that we all now felt a great sense of accomplishment. Once we had a chance to get settled a bit, I sat down with my teammates and asked them to reflect back on all that had transpired over the past few months.
We've completed a journey that so many people could only dream of doing and never actually ever get themselves to do.
Most people would never even contemplate they wouldn't even be interested in doing it.
They like the idea of it, but yeah, to execute it.
Well, I feel like this is the kind of thing people say, oh, I'd love to do someday. Or when we told everyone says, oh, I want to do that, but actually,
it's like
when the pedal comes to the metal, they would actually do that.
You know, it's such a cliche, isn't it? Life isn't a rehearsal.
No, but it
isn't. And you don't know how long you're here for. And it's like, if you don't do it now, when can you?
Jane was especially proud.
The fact that we are here and we have done it means we have an outlook that actually says you can do anything. Because you can do anything, you've just got to find out the how. I think for me personally, it was never something I ever doubted that I could do. In my mind, that was never an option. It was always the 4 of us will finish, even if we all have to get in the one car and finish in one car, or if we have to tow you, we will get here. You know, people talk about getting their cars fixed along the way, and I think that was probably the scariest thing for me, because when you're at home, you're in your comfort zone of you know which garages to go to, you know who the mechanics are, you trust them as well. Whereas you think of all the different countries you've broken down and how you've had to get help and try and explain in the garages you've been into who don't speak a word of English. That for me has been the biggie that actually shows that there is always a way to fix it. It has actually shown you what you can get achieved when actually you don't speak the language at all. And people have just been so helpful. That's been a massive eye-opener.
And that's where our collective resourcefulness really shined, because I think anyone who had any serious doubts about their competency or about their raw ability to finish this race probably don't get past the starting line. They probably back out before it even starts. And you can't blame them. This is crazy.
And I think you find that in life. Most people will always find the reason to not do something. They won't sit down and kind of go, right, how can I do this? They come up with every reason why they can't do it. Then they bemoan their lives. Those are the people who are
always seeking something else and
Always
talking
somebody
about
else's
something
fault.
else, and it's always somebody else's fault why they don't do something.
Jane seized the opportunity to turn the tables on our ringleader.
But just like to say now, this is all your fault.
When you say fault,
When you say fault, you mean
gift to you all. This is my gift to you
all those nights of sleeping in the car, all of those mechanics.
That was our fault.
The fact that you three, jumped in so quickly makes me realise why I'm friends and why I like you all. Even now, I like you all.
A level of stupidity.
There's a bit of that. You tell people that you're doing this, and a lot of people think you're absolutely nuts. They don't know what to say. It takes a certain personality just to jump in and be like, yeah, let's go. Let's do it.
Finally, the time had come for us to say goodbye to our cars and return home. The organizers of the Mongol Rally had arranged for teams to drop off their vehicles at a railhead, where they'd then be sent back to Europe and scrapped to avoid the import fees Russia would have charged if we just left the cars there. For the last time, Jane stood, admiring her and Rosie's car, which they'd nicknamed Zippy. She couldn't help but get a bit emotional, but then caught herself.
Pathetic. She's been such a good car.
She's been our absolute sanctuary on occasion.
She has. She's been our home for the last 7 weeks.
She's been our bed, she's been our dining table.
It's just a plucky little car. I think she epitomises the personalities of Jane and I as well.
In what way?
Which just keeps bloody going, doesn't she, regardless? Dogmatic, stubborn, those kind of characteristics that Jane and I share.
Out of the corner of her eye, Rosie noticed my brother bidding farewell to our beloved vehicle.
Oh, Drew's giving her a pat.
Yeah.
Are you saying goodbye to Big Red? Yeah. Aww.
Prognosis isn't good, and it's time to put her down.
Rosie walked over and knocked on our car's hood.
Thank you. Thank you for getting it all here. And she did pull Zippy when we really needed it.
Yeah.
Yeah, she's done good.
It wasn't time for me to leave just yet, but Drew, Jane, and Rosie had flights to catch, so they called for a taxi to take them to the airport. I stood next to Rosie as she waited with her luggage at the curb.
How are you feeling?
She grimaced.
Just a little sad.
You know me. I'm a very emotional person.
Yeah.
Got my makeup with me in case I have to reapply it several times. Didn't put that in the suitcase. Yeah.
She thanked me for joining her on this journey and gave me a big hug.
Well, thank you for inviting me. Thank you very much. It's been quite an adventure, and we all did it together, We made it.
The three of them got in their taxi, and it drove off. Now, there was just one thing left for me to do.
So we are here at the rail freight yard now, just arriving to scrap our cars. After 7 weeks, this is where it all ends. This is basically the car graveyard. Cars in varying states of disrepair. A lot of them dented in, some of them got in accidents, bumpers are missing, windows are missing from a few of them. They've certainly seen better days. And it's bittersweet to see all of them here like this. Because on the one hand, they're all being scrapped, or most of them anyway. But in a way, the cars did their job. They got everyone here safely. It's hard to believe, looking at some of these little tiny cars, that they were able to make it over all this terrain. Up and down mountains and horrible potholes and sand and roads that cars like these were never meant to drive on. It's kind of sad seeing our car, for the very last time. But it's time to part ways, I suppose.
So where does this leave us? Well, Rosie said she'd had her fill of adventure.
At this precise moment, I feel totally satisfied. I want to nest for a while. I really, really do. Now, I know myself well enough to know that in a few months' time, something will take my interest. That looks interesting. Would I do another road trip like this? It wouldn't be what I would be looking to do necessarily, because I've done it. And I have a philosophy about trying everything once, as much as I can.
My brother Drew said he was looking forward to returning home and sleeping in his own bed.
I don't think it's going to be too hard sitting still. I think it's just really going to be enjoyable, to be honest. It's been really crazy, and we have been nonstop, and I'm really excited to be able to sit in one place for an extended amount of time and have a normal life. I don't think I would do the same exact rally again, but you throw another crazy idea at me, and I'll definitely entertain it.
But as for me, well, I was just getting started, because there's something important I haven't told you yet. Although I was dropping off our car, Big Red, at the rail yard, I decided to hold on to Rosie and Jane's car and drive it all the way back. I mean, I figured I came this far, so why not keep going? So stay subscribed to this podcast feed, because on the next season of this show, I'll have stories from some of the many places I visited on my return journey, as well as from other adventures I've experienced around the world, including to Cambodia, Chernobyl, Japan, and Peru. In the meantime, this season isn't finished just yet. I've got one more bonus episode coming out in a few weeks, where I'll have extended conversations with several rally participants looking back at how this all impacted them and what it was like going home and returning to everyday life. And I hope to answer listener questions. So if you've been following our journey and there's anything you are wondering about, please drop me a line. You could write to info@farfromhomepodcast.org, contact the show through Facebook or Instagram, or tweet me at Scott Gurian, and I'll see if I can include you in the show. Thanks once again to the Public Radio Exchange for podcast hosting and technical support. They've been with me since the beginning, so please show them your love by downloading their free Radio Public app, because it's a great way to listen to podcasts, and they help out little guys like me. And thanks to all of you for sticking with me through all the ups and downs of our adventure. It was an amazing experience, and I hope you had as much fun listening as I did sharing all these crazy stories. See you next time.
I'm really proud of what we've done. I'm really, really proud of what we've done.